Time to go back in time. Time to talk about one of the most iconic TV shows of all time. I'm, of course, talking about The X-Files. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick Push, and welcome to my X-Files review series. That's right, I'm going to be revisiting each season of The X-Files and getting my thoughts out there on each season as this year progresses. I just finished rewatching season 1, and oh boy do I have some thoughts. So the way I'm going to do this is, at least for season 1, we're going to talk about the characters. I'm going to give you guys some of my background on season 1, some of my memories from when I was a kid, and then each season we're going to talk about a few different episodes. We're going to talk about my favorite mythology episodes from each season, and my favorite monster of the week episodes from each season. If you know anything about this show, well, I hope so, because you're watching this revisited review. But if you know anything about this show, you know that the kind of seasons are broken down into those two parts. You have most Monsters of the Week episodes, and then you get different mythology episodes, as they were called, sprinkled in throughout. So the mythology episodes are kind of just, the reoccurring government conspiracy type stuff. And the Monster of the Week episodes are just that. They're just a case that Mulder and Scully are working on. So before we get into the characters, let's talk about my background with this show. So when I was growing up, I was into horror, obviously, right? And then this TV show came along. I was a young kid, and it was on Fox. It was on, after football, after The Simpsons and all that. And this is a show that kind of captivated the nation. It wasn't, as captivating as far as, water cooler talk like, Twin Peaks, which came and ended just before this. But nonetheless, The X-Files is, one of the most 90s shows you can think of. Like I said, it's about government conspiracies, it's about aliens, and it's about all the creepy crawlies that go on in the world, and it's investigated by two FBI agents, and there's all kinds of, wacky shenanigans and mystery and horror and creepiness that are involved in each episode. Like most TV shows, especially of this nature, some episodes work a lot better than others, but there's a lot of good stuff in here. If you're a horror fan, if you're a fan of mysteries, and if you're a fan of, just like procedural TV shows in general, this is a great, great show. If you guys haven't watched this, if you haven't revisited it like I'm doing right now, I would encourage you to revisit it. All right, so right off the bat, guys, let's talk about some of the characters. Obviously, this is a show that has two main characters. Obviously there's more characters that come on as the show progresses, but for the most part, there are two main characters, and then the rest of the characters are like reoccurring side characters. Those characters, of course, who are woven into the popular culture fabric are Agent Fox Mulder, played by David Duchovny, and Agent Dana Scully, played by Gillian Anderson, and they're both played to perfection. Since I'm just talking about season 1 here, just a little bit about their characters, and then we're going to talk about some of my favorite episodes here. If you guys can't tell, I'm a big X-Files fan. I've been excited to revisit this series. I'm excited to talk about it. So it's going to kind of be a little bit of a love fest here, at least for the first few seasons before we start going, there's also a couple movies to talk about, and a revival. It's a couple revival seasons too. But I'm a big fan, so it's gonna be a lot of love talk here because I just love this show. Even though, like I said, I'll admit a lot of things that they do not work. But the positives outweigh the negatives, and that goes for both these characters too. So you have Fox Mulder, who is obsessed with the paranormal. He's obsessed with alien abductions, and he started a division called the X-Files, which essentially is a division in the FBI and the Federal Bureau of Investigation that tackles the strange and unknown phenomenon. So Mulder is obsessed with that. He was a criminal profiler, and it gave him some freedom, and he had some connections to start this. Then you get Dana Scully, who is a doctor, a medical doctor, and a scientist by trade. She is assigned to Agent Mulder by what we later know is, the cigarette smoking man who's involved. We're going to talk about him in a moment. And then, some of these other higher ups at the Bureau. Skinner doesn't come till later this season, and he's very brief in season 1. But it's essentially Scully is there, as Mulder says, to spy on him. However, they develop a relationship, a platonic relationship built on trust, built on friendship. And, Scully kind of, even though she is the skeptic to Mulder's wild ideas and wild theories, which somehow are always right, by the way, but she is a skeptic, but, she has a lot of trust in Mulder. Trust builds with the two of them throughout the season. So their dynamic, of, a believer and a skeptic, everything is fantastic. And everything we saw or we've seen in TV since then, where you have a believer and a skeptic, it can thank the X-Files formula right here. So there's a lot to like about these characters in season 1. They do get some subtle growth in season 1. Based on what they've seen, based on what Scully has seen, based on what they can explain and all the cases that they have to deal with and the different government conspiracies. They change subtly, but it's really, really well done. Speaking of other characters, let's talk about the government conspiracy right off the bat. While Scully's being assigned to Mulder, she's it's like, I think it's Agent Blevins or something like that. He's telling her, we trust you'll come to your conclusions, right? They tell her in the pilot. And you got all these other government figures standing around, a bunch of basically guys in suits. One guy just sitting there lighting up a cigarette. He's become known as Cancer Man or the Cigarette Smoking Man. He says like one word or one sentence this whole season, but he's always in the background. And he just becomes a great villain throughout the franchise as it progresses. But I really do like the government conspiracy, how things are always covered up, especially this season. But every season, there's always just some question at the end of an episode, and they're always covered up by the government, and it just has all these questions. And it's pretty interesting because you could make an argument that the X-Files in the early 90s was a product of its time, right? People didn't trust the government. It was right after the Cold War. There's a lot of World War II stuff in this season because World War II wasn't too long ago. I mean, it was, 35, 40 years ago. But you had the Cold War, World War II over, so people needed an enemy. So they didn't trust the government, right? However, there are many reasons why this show started to fail towards the later seasons and, why it was eventually canceled. And I think that was because 9/11. After 9/11 happened, people didn't want to watch a show about the government. We wanted to believe in the government. And now you can make the argument that we've come full circle again, where we don't want to trust the government. So the X-Files is just as relevant today as it was when it was created in the early 90s. Probably more relevant. But yeah, just a fascinating dynamic with the government and all that stuff. Then we have a person in the shadow government, or whatever you want to call it, who's a source for Mulder in this season. Goes by the name, or we call him, Deep Throat. Scully calls him Deep Throat. Mulder calls him Deep Throat. Something like that. But he's a bunch of basically feeding Mulder information, vague information, kind of putting him on the right track and helping him out. And all we know at this time is he is some higher up person in the government who cannot be seen with Mulder. He cannot be associated with him. Nobody can know that he's feeding Mulder this all this information he gives him, because Mulder's kind of become, a folk hero to the alien community, but he's such an annoyance and pestering to his higher ups and even his peers. His nickname is Spooky Mulder. That's what they called him at the academy, because he, just comes up with all these wild paranormal theories, which, like I said, usually end up being right. In addition to Deep Throat, we have at least one episode with the lone gunmen, who are some conspiracy nuts of their own, who help Mulder and Scully out a little bit. In this season, they're not really prevalent as they are in some later seasons, but they do show up and they are entertaining. All right. So that's pretty much the characters, right? Everyone else is just kind of one-offs as the season progresses, with the exception of Skinner, who shows up a little bit towards the end of season 1, and we'll probably talk a lot more about Skinner in seasons 2, 3, etc. All right, so let's get to my favorite episodes of season 1. And do me a favor, Comment down below if you're a big fan of the X-Files like I am, and comment some of your favorite episodes from season 1. What I wanted to do when I first did this was talk about my favorite mythology episode and my favorite Monster of the Week episode. And then I started watching season 1. I've kind of been watching one episode a day, one episode before bed per night. And basically what happened is there's too much good stuff here. Season 1, while I wouldn't call it a great season, is a very, very good season for what it does for this show. It sets you up on this journey with these characters, with these agents, and with all these different, monsters and things that are in the dark and aliens that are all out there. So season 1 has a lot of good episodes. So I have 3 mythology episodes I'm going to talk about and 3 Monster of the Week episodes. The Monster of the Week episodes, especially in the early seasons, were fucking fantastic. The mythology episodes in the early seasons were really, really good, and then they went off a cliff after a while because they had no end game, right? But let's talk about my first mythology episode, and that's going to be the pilot, okay? The pilot, like I said, sets the stage for what the show is going to be. And it's essentially Mulder and Scully investigating a case in Oregon involving Billy Miles, who will come up again in season 8, by the way. If you're a big X-Filey, you'll know that. But Billy Miles is some kind of paraplegic kid, and there's something weird happening where he's ending up basically in the forest, and he's like giving kids to some alien force, right? We don't know that at the beginning, but it's just this whole mythos building here going on of Scully learning what Mulder thinks and her, questioning it, but then being scared and believing it. And there's just a lot going on here that we don't understand. As the episode progresses, you see Mulder and Scully, driving their car, and they lose like 9 minutes, right, of time, and Scully thinks it's crazy, but Mulder's adamant. And, as the episode progresses, one mystery leads to another mystery, and we're left with no answers. You could probably say that for 90% of the episodes, right? But it's so well done here. And that final image of Scully having a little chip or something that was in Billy Miles' neck, I think it was, and handing it off to Agent Blivens, I think that's his name, who assigned her to spy on Mulder. Having her send that off, and then you get the cigarette smoking man in his second appearance in the episode and in the show, walking in some big government warehouse, basically, kind of like Raiders of the Lost Ark, putting it in a box or something, and walking through, and you just get to pan out to all this other stuff that's probably similar that the government has just stashed away, and you see him exit the door, and you see that it's at the Pentagon. And that's how the episode ends, just wrapped in mystery. I remember seeing this pilot live when I was a kid, and I was hooked right away. So that's the first mythology episode I want to talk about. The second one is going to be called EBE. It's about halfway through the season. EBE stands for Extraterrestrial Biological Entity. And this is a big Deep Throat episode. So Deep Throat is giving Mulder this information about a kind of an alien spacecraft or an alien that is on some truck. Okay? And Mulder and Scully are following the truck. And then Deep Throat's lying to Mulder again, or lying to him. And there's a lot of mistrust going on, and Mulder and Scully basically end up finding where this alien is kept after traveling across the country, and they end up in some warehouse, and Mulder, evades the army guys and ends up coming almost face to face. He doesn't quite see it, but almost face to face with an EBE, an alien lying there, and then Deep Throat comes and basically tells Mulder why he's doing what he's doing, why he is helping Mulder. And it's essentially because he executed an alien and he felt bad for it. So he kind of realized he might be on the wrong side. So he can't do anything about it, but Mulder's quest is something that he can help with. And he has to be very careful, because if he gives Mulder too much information, it's going to go back to him. Okay? So really cool episode, a lot of intrigue, especially with the aliens and what are they on to, and Deep Throat. And it's just really, really good. Which brings me to my final mythology episode I wanted to talk about, and that is going to be the season finale called the Erlenmeyer Flask, and this is kind of the culmination of the character of Deep Throat, because he gets executed at the end of this episode, and we're just shocked. But basically, there is an alien-human hybrid walking around, and I know if you haven't seen it, it sounds crazy, right? But he's bleeding green, he's evading the cops, and Mulder and Scully just keep going after Clue after clue. Scully gets her evidence in something called purity control, which is like a liquid, takes it to get tested, and by definition, it's extraterrestrial. So Scully's world's turned upside down. While that's going on, Mulder finds these tanks of these human beings in water, breathing underwater. And then what happens, of course? He goes to show Scully, and the government has cleaned it up. The scientist Scully had checking the purity control, her and her family are murdered, or there was an accident and they're dead, right? The government just covered up its tracks, and the season ends with Mulder and Scully, Deep Throat being dead, Scully kind of getting the little mini alien to trade for Mulder's life. Deep Throat, like I said, is executed, and the X-Files is closed. And boom, end of season. So just a great end of the season. We got a lot of good mythology stuff throughout the season, but those are my favorite parts of the mythology episodes. However, I think the strongest part of season 1 of the X-Files, even though I love the mythology stuff, is the Monster of the Week episodes. And it was tough choosing 3 here. There's a lot I wanted to choose, but there is 3 that just completely stand out above the rest for me. Number 1 being the first Monster of the Week episode, and that's called Toombs. And it's basically this guy, Eugene Toombs. It's called Squeeze. There's another episode called Toombs later in the season where it's kind of a sequel to this. But it's called Squeeze. Why is it called Squeeze? Because this guy, Eugene Toombs, can squeeze in between like air vents and murder people. And essentially, he's this creature, this guy, who every 30 years wakes up and needs to harvest like 5 livers or 5 organs, and he can get into anyone's apartment, no matter how much you think, I have a door right here, it's locked. Toombs could squeeze right through there. He goes through air vents, and it's just really creepy the way they have him in shadows, the way his eyes light up yellow. Toombs is one of the creepiest villains the X-Files has ever done. And you say Eugene Toombs to an X-Files fan, the hair on their neck can stand up if they're a fan of this show. He was that creepy. He's up there with one of the creepiest monsters in television history. So Squeeze is a great episode. And then we move a little further along in the season, and we got an episode called Ice. Ice is essentially a love letter to John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, you guys know me. I'm a huge fan of John Carpenter, a huge fan of The Thing. And Ice, while not as good as The Thing, it's pretty goddamn good. It's actually, it's set, I think it's supposed to be set in Alaska. And, even some of the exterior shots, I think, are the actual shots from the movie The Thing. But essentially similar concept based on paranoia. Mulder and Scully go up to investigate something that happened with these ice drillers. They're drilling in ice, and they end up all murdering each other and murdering themselves. So they bring a couple of guys up there, including Kenny Bania from Seinfeld, and they go up there, and it's this little like organ, this little like organism that infects people. He also, in an homage to The Thing, when they go there, a dog is already infected. A dog bites one of these guys, the helicopter pilot, and he's changing, and they're all wondering who's infected, who's not. It's just really well done. Like I said, they're stuck in there because of snowstorm outside, or because they're in fucking Alaska, right? Too cold to go anywhere else, and they don't know who is themselves. What does that remind you of? Right, The Thing. So a very well done episode. And finally, next is going to be an episode called Darkness Falls. It's an episode that always stuck out to me. I know it might not be the most popular answer for, third favorite Monster of the Week episode, but it's kind of similar to Ice, where instead of being in Alaska, they're in the Pacific Northwest, where you have these loggers who cut down some old tree that's thousands of years old, and there was something in there. These bugs, these little green bugs that only come out at night, and they fucking can cocoon people. So Mulder and Scully are stuck up in this cabin, with a generator that's running out of gas, and they got to get out of there before nightfall. And it's just a really, really great episode. There's some awesome imagery with one of the guys being cocooned in his car, and all kinds of shit. And what happens at the end of this episode? Mulder's concerned about the bugs, and the government is already taking care of it. They're already getting rid of the evidence. which, like I said, is a theme of this show, and it's really well done in the early seasons, especially season 1 here. So that wraps up my favorite episodes of each of the Monster of the Week and the mythology of the X-Files season 1. What more is there to say about this show? There's a lot more to say about this show. Things get more convoluted as far as the mythology as the seasons progress. But looking at season 1 as a whole, like I said, it's not my favorite season, but it's far from the worst, and it's definitely probably the top 4, maybe the top 3 of the seasons of the X-Files. And you get Mulder and Scully's relationship building. You're finding out about this world and this government, or our government, and what they do to cover their tracks, and to, you ask all kinds of questions, right? What is the right thing to do? Is it to just, tell the people the truth like Mulder wants, get the proof like Scully wants, or cover it up like the smoking man in the government wants? There is no answer. There is no right answer to that. You might think you have the right answer, but none of us actually have the right answer. So those questions are really, really well done in this. Obviously, right away you root for Mulder and Scully, especially as their trust builds. So David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson are fantastic in these roles. They get even better as the series progresses. And the X-Files season 1, started a phenomenon. You say the truth is out there, most people know they're talking about the X-Files. You hear that doom, 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 the theme song, most people know what that is. It's just woven into the fabric of popular culture, and has been for 30 and some odd years. So I'm excited, guys, to start watching season 2. I actually just started. Excited to go through there, give you guys my thoughts on season 2, because like I said, this show just keeps getting better and better till it doesn't. But season 1 is a fantastic season. So like I said, tell me in the comments, are you a fan of the X-Files? And let me know what kind of X-Files rankings you'd want me to do when I'm done with this revisited. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you on the next one.